Thank you, everybody, and welcome to this portion of tonight's Public Works Recreation Committee meeting. I am your chair, Jason Trombetta. I'll start with any change in order of items on the agenda. Seeing none. Disclosure of pecuniary interest or any conflict of interest. Seeing none. There are no appointments tonight, so obviously no requests to address. Is there any buddy here to address any items on the agenda? Oh, Councillor Bell.
I'd just like at the appropriate time, I'd like to put a motion to speak to under others in regards to the conversation that we had in the administration finance going forward in public works. So under other, that would be under D.
Okay, so, sorry, and under other items of business?
Yes,
You want it on section 9?
yes.
To in relation to the stop sign at Oakdale and Georgia-Cocos Boulevard there? So does he need a motion, Madam CAO?
Through members of the committee, it was my understanding that Councillor Bell was going to advise you that he would like this item on the next Public Works agenda, and that he was going to do that under other business, but if you wanted to deal with the matter tonight, it would be a new item in business, and that's only really supposed to be done in an emergency. So I would recommend that he advise you under other business items of an informative nature, and it's just going on the next
Sorry, Madam
agenda.
CAO, I misunderstood him then. Okay, no problem, Councillor Bell. Thank you for that update. All right, sorry, so let me scroll back to the top. Consent agenda items. Item PW01-18, West Lincoln Public Library Board Minutes, October 17, 2017, and November 14, 2017, and December 8th, 2017. Item 2, report RFD PW01 2018 road widening condition and consent 7642 and 7750 concession 2 road land transfer declaration as public highway. The recommendation item 1 be hereby and receive for information. I need a mover. No, sorry. No, I need a mover and a seconder, or you want it?
Nobody pulled anything, so you
Oh, sorry, my mistake, Councillor Bell. Item 2, that hereby receive for, item 2, and be hereby received for the recommendations contained therein are adopted with the exemption of, seeing none, so now I need a mover. Councillor Bellsma, thank you for helping me out there. And Councillor Ganan, any comments or questions? None, sorry, seeing none. All those in favor? And that's carried. There's no communications. Staff reports. Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble. Director of Public Works, and Brent Julian. Recommendation, delegation of authority to direct Public Works relating to on-site construction of primary and secondary services for the site plan subdivision and condominium developments. This item was referred from our planning meeting on January 15th, 2018. The recommendation that PD 006-18 regarding delegation of authority to direct of Public Works relating to on-site construction of primary secondary service or site plan, subdivision and condominium developments dated January 15, 2018 be received, and that the delegation bylaw in the form of the draft version found at attachment 1 to this report be approved. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Chichuk, Councillor Baalsma. Comments or questions? Councillor Bell?
So, this, sorry. What we're doing here is basically giving our Director of Public Works authority to, if he sees an item that needs to be addressed in the field, he has the authority to do so. The one that coming up is dealing with Stepping Stone, is what's brought this to light, dealing with curbs. For condominiums, I don't have an issue with that because it makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of funds that go into putting the curb in, taking the curb out, putting the curb in, you know, because of breakage. during the construction period. If they're willing to lay extra white asphalt, which they are, and at a certain point put it in, and with condominiums, they're, they do have kind of a drop dead deed on there saying that it has to be, curbs have to be in by here. It's not like when they do a subdivision and they build a home here and a home there, and it could go on forever. I don't have issue giving the director authority for condominium sites to do this. However, I do at this point have an issue with subdivisions. I think we need to have more discussion about subdivisions and specifically what kind of authority we're looking at with the subdivision, waiting times to get things done, because again, and I've said it before, we're bringing residents to our community. We want them to come. Everybody works hard to get them here, including the builders. And yet, at the end of the day, they're waiting to get things done. They move into their homes, and it seems like forever before they get certain things done. And we, as a township, we feel a whole lot of calls, and we go through the finger pointing, well, it's their fault, it's his fault. It's, for me personally, I've had enough of that noise. It's time that we address this issue and move on with it. And if we can come up with a solution that's workable for everybody when we do subdivisions, by all means, I don't have an issue giving our directors authority. That's the reason they're in that position, because we have trust in what they do. And by no means am I trying to take away their authority or their trust by not granting this tonight. I do want to grant the condominium portion of it, but not fully. That's kind of where I'm at with it, so I'm okay with that.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Do you want to elaborate on that, Mr. Director?
Sure, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. As Councillor Bell said, some of these subdivisions can go a rather long time before there's assumption to the tune of years in some cases. So I would inform committee that this is not something that I would recommend on a subdivision. There are other ways to protect the curb. In this particular situation, it is a private entity. The township will never own that road. They tend to go a little quicker as well, but we see this as on a case-by-case situation, this being at this time a one-off. So if that helps.
Okay, so what if we were just to remove the word subdivision?
Yeah, and that's, I guess, let me turn that on. I guess I just understand what the director said. This is kind of a one-off. This is, I think we need, looking for this clarification. So is this for all condominiums, or just a one-off for this one specific request at this point? And we need to reword it so that subdivisions are not included now or in the future until we have further discussions moving forward. I mean, like I said, I'm okay doing Stepping Stone, and I'm also okay doing other condominium sites because, as you said, they are private. All the private ones, no problem. I mean, if they're coming into where the township is possibly could face costs or liabilities, and we have to look at them.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, through you to the members of the committee, the other part of the concern that we had was that you could, in essence, in theory, have people occupy a home for whatever length of time that ends up being. It could be a significant time with no curbs, no driveway depressions, that kind of thing. So as Councillor Bell had suggested, with a subdivision you can have pockets of houses going up and until that whole subdivision gets done, and that's probably the most likely time then that the curb would get constructed. So that could be a rather extended time that you could be living in your house without a curb in front of your house, which can affect your lot grading because you don't have a curb to grade to, that type of thing. So that's some of our concerns, and that's why we see this as a particular situation that we're willing to assist the developer in, but we definitely want to make it clear that this is not something a practice that we want to be consistent with moving forward.
So, through you, Mr. Chair. So then, I'd like to put an amendment to this, just saying this is, and we'll have to word it, but strictly it's a one-off for this specific site right now, because it sounds like even our director has some concerns, and we need to bring it back at a later date to address all these and make sure, but not to hold this one specific site up right now. I'm okay granting, yes, let's move forward as a one-off.
Okay, Counselor Bell, I know you, can you hold your amendment at the moment? Because I just know that there's some other members of the committee that want to make some comments to
For
this.
sure.
I have Counselor Bellsman next, and then to my left, I have Counselor Chichok.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I put my trust in the Director of Public Works insofar as, like, and I don't think that Councillor Bell was in any way trying to undermine the trust that he has in the Director, but I guess in terms of the difficulty, the cumbersome nature of just, coming to council and, negotiating these for particular surveys and subdivisions. I think the director knows our feelings on what's happened. Of course, he bears the full brunt of a lot of those decision-making challenges and the cumbersome nature of it. So I guess I speak in favor of this simply to say that ultimately, if something comes to a point where we do have a series of complaints, we only have to, in that sense, talk to one person, and we don't have to get private corporations and such involved. We can go to our own Director of Public Works, and all of our directors know that they do answer to council, and so if there's a decision that we don't like, we can correct it, and we just have to correct it with the one person, communicate it to one person. And so I speak in favor of giving that latitude to the Director of Public Works, and for the purposes of, today it's a one-off, but we do as a community have other projects that are moving forward, so this might be more used in the future. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I guess I understand the concerns of both my colleagues across the table, and through you to our Director of Engineering. Is this really a one-off, or do we have other projects, whether they're condominiums or subdivisions? Are there other projects underway where we may have these kinds of problems arising in the very near future, such that we don't want to, if we do a one-off and we remove the word subdivision, are there other developments that could be impacted and could be coming to you for difficulties with curbs and or roads?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Chichak. Difficult question to answer. Looking into the future, right now there are no other. The only other future condominium I can think of would be the Old Town Gateway one
Shirley Road.
to the north. Okay, but that is already behind us. The one that's on there now, that's already behind us. They were already past that point. There are a couple other smaller ones, but they've been on the books for quite a while, and we haven't seen the fruition of that yet.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, what I was looking for is, we had staff come forward, and I understand the conundrum we're in. We want to make sure that we're not giving too much authority away such that we don't want to have either councillors, individuals, or as a group, or developers coming in and saying, hey, you've got authority in pressuring different things. But on the other hand, we sure don't want to see that so do we or don't we change the wording in the whereas, the recital that says with respect to plan of subdivision, plan of condominium, and site plan. And that's what my colleagues are addressing now. And the way I would like reassurance is that this does or doesn't, can or can't in the very near future causes more problems if we limit the wording, because your proposal was as it stands.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Chichuk. So I think the wording is intended for general purposes to give a flexibility that we can make decisions on what we would think are reasonable and minor situations. It's, as I said to committee, it's not something I would take lightly. I certainly wouldn't grant that authority for a subdivision because it just doesn't make sense. But to try to predict what is and what isn't at this point would be difficult. I would just say that the wording is intended to give some flexibility to staff to make some of those decisions.
Thank you. So and through you again, Mr. Chair, I in no way am undermining any of the authority and trust that I have in staff, but the whole idea is by putting plan of subdivision in there, it would not allow a subdivision of 100 lots to have chunks of road and curb not done for years. So the idea of putting this into place in a way that will not see that happen is the question. That's what we're looking for, is to find out whether or not that will happen or not. So through you, Mr. Chair, to the director, I'm asking, how would we be assured that it wouldn't happen if we left the word subdivision in there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Chichuk, beyond my personal assurances, I can't give you much more than that. I can't speak for the, for people that would come after me. I don't. That's about all I can tell you is common sense has to prevail, I guess, a bit.
And my last question, Mr. Chair, through you, is, was this intended to be a one-off for this one subdivision, or was it intended to be more general for the go forward for the next several months, several years, in your opinion?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Chichuk, I think I can answer that.
Good, because you
sorry.
wrote the report.
So the Stepping Stone project is what highlighted
Issue.
this situation, right? And through discussions with the developer and with planning department, we felt that this might be the most appropriate because of the significant delays that the developer will incur before they can get a building permit now, right? Because without those
Yes.
primary services, right,
They're limited.
done right. The only, I guess, the one thing that maybe is not mentioned here, we have had discussions with the developer, Catalina, the incorporated firm. We are not entering into this without a letter of understanding, a letter of undertaking that this does not get done, that this has to get done by May 15th. That is the agreement that we came to terms with.
For this one particular.
Pending council approval, yes. Does that help?
For this particular application, sure. Thank you very much.
I got a few, if anybody else doesn't have any, I got a few comments here. So, to you, Mr. Director Brent Julian. So how this all came about? So what happened when I have an idea how it all happened. At the end of the year, due to weather, Catalina approached you, said we can't lay curbs down for this condominium site, or was it earlier than that? Was that sort of the idea that happened there? They wanted to go with, let's say, an extra couple feet of asphalt behind obviously the CBs, and extend the asphalt and not put the curb in due to the time of the weather and such, correct?
To you, Mr. Chair, it was the late fall that we had discussions, I think in the range of November, and they were looking for, what it would take to get their primary certificate, and the inquiries were made, and that was when we had the discussion about the curb not being done.
So the consultant on site approached you and said, listen, this is what's happening, and, we got to make a decision because they don't want to lay curb down.
To you, Mr. Chair, the developer had approached us inquiring about the requirements for the preliminary certificate of completion of services, right?
Okay.
So that they could get this thing moving forward, and that was when the discussion of the curb came out.
Okay. So this delegation, does this give it an actual drop dead date? So it's pretty much left in your hands now saying, let's say, and I'm just throwing a date out there, not that this is done, so tomorrow morning this has to be done. Does this falls in your hands now after this delegation for this specific one only?
To you, Mr. Chair, yes. So preliminary discussions, we had, as I said, we had discussed about, the limitless timeline that could, in theory, happen. So we had advised the developer that there was no way that we would be doing that we would need a deadline set through a letter of undertaking. And that was, through a process of conversations that we had with them, but we came up with the May 15th. Actually, I set the May 15th.
You set the May 15th.
I did, yes. And that was set thinking in terms of reasonability of the construction
and-
world,
and,
which you're
yeah,
aware of, right?
spring thaw, correct.
Right.
Correct.
And how much time do they have to get a contractor in there? That's how that decision was made.
Correct. So that May 15th date is for all curb to be completed for that condominium site. So as my next question to you, Mr. Director, so when it comes to a subdivision, and I'm trying to get both sides here, how councilors feel. So when it comes to a subdivision, if the subdivision obviously is not fully developed, you can still set a deadline date and want all the curb in with this delegation at a certain date you want, even though the houses aren't all developed or not. Because what I'm kind of afraid of, and I've seen this in many situations, if you have a block of homes that are 4 homes and there's no curb, obviously erosion is going to just settle on the side of the end of that curb and come in from a person's driveway, and you have issues always, right? So would this delegation set the date, or you decide what to pick, or is it for the whole entire subdivision?
To you, Mr. Chair, that date is specific to the Stepping Stones development. That's right.
And I'm aware of that date, but
Okay.
with this delegation tonight, will that, because the word subdivision is in this, and because maybe the wording is what's confusing for some of the members of committee here, will this delegation, if we approve tonight, carry on to the future subdivisions and so on and so forth?
To you, Mr. Chair, if that bylaw is passed, that gives the Director of Public Works flexibility to, in subdivisions or condos.
So then after this is passed tonight, you can decide how much curb to get put down for a subdivision or not, or the entire thing can it all lies in pretty much the director's hands. Is that correct?
To you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. I would tell you, though, that is not something that I would consider. That's the best I can. And
So you're not telling me to consider this delegation?
well, no, to do a subdivision in piecemeal is not the way I think.
Correct, and that's not the way, I think, right? So that's what I'm asking, so this, pretty much, what I'm trying to say is get around this delegation, which I think some of my members of committee are having to get their head around, is if we do grant this tonight, it gives the next director or acting to say, listen, I'll be dealing, all the final dates got to come through me, and then that gets completed once I give full approval.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to you, Mr. Chair, and to members of the committee, that's actually correct.
Okay. Okay. So I'm thinking, sorry to ramble on, members of committee, I'm thinking here now, does that prolong it, or does that speed it up? So when the developer has their certain date, okay, to finish in completion date, they set the completion date is what I'm asking. Then they come to you, and then it's your decision to say yes or no. So that can obviously, by approving this delegation, that can also delay the completion date in some senses too. If you were not here, like I say, a new director's here is what I'm trying to say. and they say, okay, yeah, you can finish it at this certain date or whatever, right? That's what I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around.
To you, Mr. Chair, and I understand that, and that is the, I guess, the issue, you know, that you would be relying on the director's good sense, I guess, if you will.
Correct.
But that would put that into the hands of that director, yes.
So that means you're going to work here for another 30, 40 years at least, right? Time.
Well, thank you
Thank
for
you.
that job security.
Councilor Chico?
Mr. Chair, I believe that Councillor Bill is going to want to put something forward. And what I heard, the issue that put this forward was the fact that we had one subdivision, one condominium development that was there. And that was in need of a correction, because we can't, it would be inappropriate to let this thing go and not issue building permits because of a technicality. And I guess the question really is, the items here before us to expedite that particular condo, the question then becomes, should, prior to the end of this term of council or in the very near future, should there be better wording in there that talks about how it is to be handled generally? Because if it's May 15th of every year that you want curbs in there, if it's May 15th if you want curbs in front of all houses that have foundation poured or whatever, that kind of wording might give us more comfort to allow it to be subdivisions, etc. But I think that at this moment in time, we have an issue that we're trying to resolve, and we're trying to find a specific item, and we're trying to find a generalized wording that will satisfy everyone. And I do hope that Mr. Julian someday does get to reap the bounty of his rewards in a retirement that's full of good health and comfort. So I think that tonight, if we have to do it specific to the subdivision before us, and Mr. Julian were to come forward at the next meeting with something that broadens the scope of this, I don't know how Councillor Bell would feel, but I think that might satisfy the need for tonight. So Councillor Bell's motion to limit it might be useful, and
So-
then revise it later.
You're saying, Councilor Chichek, if we can just kind of word this in a way that we're saying to this specific condominium site and this site only.
I think that's where we're at, because I hear your comments about tonight, and I'm thinking, okay, so now we're trying to find comfort for the long-term future, but when we really have an issue that's got to be resolved. So
Correct.
if we dealt with the issue at hand or modified the report, and with the understanding that the Director of Public Works will come back with something that broadens it, with wording that comforts everybody, I'd be in favor of that remedy and going forward in that manner, and I'd support Councillor Bell's motion.
So, Cole's note version, that's exactly what I want to go is, as I said earlier, let's approve this one individual site for Stepping Stone. I'd like to send it back to staff to come back in the future with a solution that we can include subdivisions. Not 100% what that is, there's different ideas. But for tonight, so we don't hold this one up, I'd like to exclusive to this subdivision only. And second part is going back to staff and having them come back at a later date with another proposal that we can discuss further and hopefully come up with something, possibly getting some of the builders involved in your discussions and things to bring it forward, so we all get a better understanding of what it is we're looking at and where we're going. That's what I'm
Okay, thank you.
proposing.
Thank you, Councilor Bell. So, yeah, Joe, so an amendment's coming, do we have to just, or do you want to just site-specific this amendment? Or the site-specific this item?
Perhaps we should be referring to future committee meeting, this report
But the,
consideration, and then put another, put a recommendation forward, put a recommendation forward with respect to doing the approval for studies and this evening to allow the director.
Okay.
Refer this report to a future.
Okay.
Thanks for meeting
If that satisfies Councillor Bell, can we do that? Okay. So Councillor Bell has a motion to send this back to, this item back to staff.
We have the original motion.
The original motion.
Referral motion to refer it back to a future
Okay.
meeting, and then we can deal with.
So to have this referred, I need a mover. No, I don't. We have them both?
Well, yes, I'm sorry, you did do that, so yes, you sorry.
Councillor Balsma, Councillor Bell, to refer this item back to this one specific, and then we have to come with another. All those in favor? And that carries. Councillor Bell, for new
So the
motion.
new motion would be to approve Stephenstone that they can have the curbs put in, I believe it was by May 15th. So they can move forward to get the permits and not hold that site up.
Okay. So then we can have an amendment to, on a motion, sorry, an emotion forward that, that the delegation be authorized to this site-specific stepping stones to move forward as directed through Director Brent Julian. At the discretion, that's fine. So I need a mover for that. Councillor Bell, I need a seconder. Councillor Chichuk, all those in favor, and that carries. Thank you. Got it? So move on to other business. Item PW02-18, Director of Public Works Engineering, Brent Julian. MERS update. It's a verbal update.
Yes, to you and through you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, and thank you. My monthly MERS update. Construction is progressing on the site. It's moving pretty good, actually. Foundation works are now complete. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to see the structure, but you can actually see it going up in the sky now. Servicing works are approximately 50% completed, 50 to 60%. Work has started to rough in the parking lot area. There's a road crossing that's to be scheduled for a connection of the new water main to the existing water main out on West Street. That's something that the contractor has to sort out with the lane restrictions with the regional requirements, and when we get that information on the road restriction, we'll advise council. As I said, structural steel is approximately 50% complete. Works are focusing on the library area first, keeping in mind its expected opening for the summer. The weather and the Christmas break delayed the structural steel by about approximately 2 weeks. The contractor is hoping to make up some of that time as the progress progresses, though. At this time, the target date for the library and the outdoor play features is still for early July. Masonry works are projected to commence approximately the end of next week. So you'll actually start to see some of the interior of that building start to go up. Design is about 90% complete, and we're still working on things like interior finishing, flooring, ceiling, hardware, and part of the reason why the architect wasn't able to come tonight was they were still trying to finalize some of these finishes between themselves and Ball, and that information should be ready for presentation to council next month. Items such as furniture, security, sound systems, signage, they're all being reviewed and prepared for tender preparation. These were items that were in the contract that were part of cash flow allowances. The dollars are allocated in the contract, but Ball Construction will actually have to do the tenders, right? We're just finalizing the needs of the building. Precast walls are tentatively scheduled for the week of February 12th, so that's kind of neat. We'll start seeing exterior walls go up. And as I said, our architect is still working on finalizing some items, but is planning on making a presentation to the public, at the Public Works Committee for the February meeting. And that's my report, members of the committee. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Brent. Move on to B, item PW 03-18, CEO West Lincoln Public Library, Vanessa Holm, Wellandport Library Hall project update. Hi, Vanessa, welcome.
Hi. So through you, Mr. Chair, to you and members of committee, I'm happy to report that construction at Wellandport is also going really well. The building is now enclosed and the roofing is almost done. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to drive by. You can really see it taking shape. The windows are installed, the brick is complete, the interior framing is almost done, and we expect drywall to start this week. The exterior work progressed really well. When it got cold, though, there had to be a bit of a hold, so the parking lot is graded and complete, and paving will take place shortly. The sidewalks are poured and the septic system will be installed in the next couple weeks. In terms of design, we have finished the security and that work has started. We're looking at furniture options and signage will be finalized shortly. So everything's moving along well.
Excellent. Thank you, Vanessa.
You're welcome.
Okay, item PW 04-18, members of council, any other business of an informative nature? I'll start to my left.
Nothing, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councilor Gannon, nothing? Councilor Boswell? Councilor Bell? You just had your other item. So I have nothing to read here about it, so you can bring it forward now, yeah? You can have item D.
So, looking for Oakdale Boulevard, George Dukakis Drive, Oakdale Boulevard and Golden Acres, those two intersections. Would like to send it back to staff to have a look at it. Looking to have stop signs installed at both intersections.
So you have,
I know we have to do the warrants and look at them through the warrants, and I do understand that there's a lot of issues with the warrants. Why they don't recommend them and the liabilities that there could be and et cetera that goes with it. I understand all that. Had a lot of discussions with the director about these, and he's had more information today that he's brought forward. So I think the fair thing is to send it back to the director, have a look at them, come back to council with a full report,
just on that intersection only, right?
just on those two intersections.
Two intersections,
There's two
sorry.
of them, George Dukakis and Golden Acres,
Yep.
both running along Oakdale. I believe that we need stop signs there in light of what's happened with the new College Street School, with the kids. The bus service is all changed now. That's all walking area. They will not be bused any longer over there. And it's always been a well-known speed area, but, you know, we've held off on the stop signs, paying attention to the warrants. But I think there's a point where there's liabilities in everything in life, and that's one of our things. If something should happen out there and the warrant says, don't do it, we've done it, we could be liable. But then the other side of the coin is that, you know, we have a responsibility to protect the residents of West Lincoln, and that includes our young youth, whether they be toddlers or older. So I'm recommending it goes back to staff, comes back for a fulsome discussion next month.
So I have a motion by Councillor Bell to go back to staff and revisit the Oakdale and Georgakakis and Golden Acres and Oakdale intersections. It's moved by Councillor Bell. I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Gannon. Comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, Councillor Bell.
please.
There's no, anybody with any items of new business? Item 10, nobody? And I think we will be going into confidential matters. So I'd like to thank all members of the gallery for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it and staying with us. And we'll be going into confidential matters. Item PW 05-18, Councillor Cheryl Ganan and Chair, West Lincoln Public Library Board, Joanne Packham, plus CAO, West Lincoln Public Library, Vanessa Holm. Personal matters, pay equity, and staffing issues. It's an update. And attached, everyone will have, for personal matters, attached to be distributed at a meeting, applicable personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal, local boards of employee, labor relations of employee negotiations, and that's a verbal update. So we will be heading into, I need a mover and a second to go into confidential. Councillor Bosma, Councillor Bell. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Mr. Julian.
Good night.
Have a good night. All those in favor? And that carries, sir.